well, we don't live in a post-truth world, in my world at least. There are facts. Journalism is built on facts. So let's talk about some of them. As skilled, I'm sure, as you are, you certainly don't take precedence in your opinion over the ruling of one of the highest courts in the land. And I just think it's a really interesting sort of propaganda technique, this idea that an Israeli can kind of pop up and say, well, I don't think it's genocide. And it's like, well, hold on, there's an entire court system built on, international law in which some of the top minds in the world have considered these issues. But hold on, let's also just consider your opinion, shall we? No, these courts have ruled and they have stated very clearly what their findings are. And in fact, they have repeated calls for Israel to halt its violence. The focus, again, it's part of the propaganda machine, this focus on Hamas, these gays, they're going to, be killed by Hamas, thrown off rooftops. No incidences that we can quote, of course, but of course, gay Palestinians are being killed under bombs in Gaza right now. Not much being done on that, but hey, let's not talk about those gay Palestinians. The state of Israel, this idea that the state of Israel should be obliterated. Who is being obliterated right now, sir? Who is being obliterated right now? These are projections that really do require, on your question, some deep self-examination, because it's really positioning yourself as if the value of your fantasies, your projected fantasies of imagined violence should take precedence over the very real violence that's being exercised today, right now, against Palestinians. And that is centering your feelings and potential feelings over a reality that is occurring at this present moment in time. You also say you would hope that if you had seen some of the horrors that Hamas had engaged in, that you wouldn't, go around killing people indiscriminately. But sir, that is exactly what your military is doing. It is going around killing people indiscriminately. We have seen BBC News, which has not been particularly great on this issue, itself verify images of snipers shooting children, teenagers, 9-year-olds, snipers shooting children. Are we hearing this, people? There are mass graves that have been discovered in the grounds of hospitals. These mass graves have been shown to contain the bodies of people who were tortured, medical professionals tortured as they were trying to stay behind to assist people. There was evidence of people in those graves who were buried alive. You don't need to project fictional war crimes. They are happening right here and now. And if you cared about them as a principle, as opposed to only about your own, that would be your focus, not the fictionalized fantasy that you are projecting. In addition to that, Israel currently detains thousands of political prisoners, hostages, Palestinian hostages. And there are now innumerable reports showing the torture and abject conditions that these Palestinian hostages are kept under. Many of these people, most of them are civilians. Some of them are children. There's evidence of some of these children being kept in cages. There's reports of sexual assault against women and children and men in Israeli detention. Do not let this two sides narrative. It isn't to say that Palestinians are perfect people. Of course not. But can we deal with the emergency that we have in front of us right now, which is an ongoing genocide right now as we speak? Not one that comes down to the opinion of any particular person, but that is based on the ruling of the highest court in this land. That's the priority right now.
Now, there are certain elements that I completely in agreement with you, Myriam. I mean, for example, I do sense that deep dehumanization of Palestinians by many Israelis. This is very true. And this has been an ongoing process of the radicalization that I've seen in my own society. Now, it's horrible, it's hard, and I have to... There are two elements here. One is, yes, to try and criticize it harshly. The other is, and this is partly my task, as a human being, but also as a scholar, to try to understand that. And I think that I can partly understand that from within. For example, there were 3 hostages that managed to release themselves from captivity by Hamas, okay? And they were completely naked. They've virtually nothing on them. And they waved a white fabric above their heads. They were killed by the IDF, okay? That thought that they were Palestinians. I think that that's a good enough indication that things like that have happened. It is not an institutional policy. But as Myriam was alluded to, yes, there were many cases by the horrible government that we now have that have referred to the Palestinians as if there are no innocent Palestinians and all of them support Hamas and we should do away with all of them, which is horrible. But again, I think it's wrong factually. I think it's wrong morally to simply see that aspect of it, which is true, and ignore the other part of it, which is also true. That's things like that we have seen. This sort of dehumanization is things that we have seen among Hamas and not just Hamas, vis-a-vis Israelis, right? That those people storming Israel, phoning their parents, being so proudful of killing women, children, just boosting any name of religion.
Let's put it this way. Israel is a massive threat to peace and security regionally and globally. And that is not the narrative you're getting. That's why you're not getting the truth.
Thank you.
You talked about the Hamas Charter, laying out this genocidal vision. We don't need to be speculative when we talk about Israel's genocidal vision. It's happening right now. And for you to discuss a hypothetical generic genocide that is not happening at a time when an actual genocide is ongoing is frankly distasteful and, in my opinion, disgraceful. There are now plenty of polls that show that it's not just a fringe within Israeli society. I wish I could tell you it was. I lived in Jerusalem. I lived in the occupied territories. The situation has got worse. Are there Israeli peace builders? Abso-freaking-lutely. And thank God for those people. But they are a minority. They are today deeply embattled. They live in fear for their own security, and they cannot be public about their opposition. Otherwise they receive much of the same treatment meted out to the Palestinians. When we talk about the Israeli public, a poll in December 2023 showed that this poll asked Israeli Jews, to what extent should Israel take into consideration the suffering of the civilian population in Gaza when planning continuing the fighting? 80% said to a very small or fairly small extent. There is a massive dehumanization of the Palestinian population by Israel, unfortunately, that has filtered deep down into Israeli society, which is why we found TikToks of regular Israelis making fun of mothers losing their children. It's why we see pseudo-rap tracks trying to eulogize what Israel is doing in Gaza, which by all intents and purposes is horrific. It is objectively horrific. And so this idea that it's just a minority of Israelis who are caught up in an extremist narrative, I'm afraid that's part of the spin. And don't be caught up in the spin that gets you focusing on Hamas when actually the majority of people who are being killed in Gaza today and who are being ethnically cleansed in the West Bank today are Palestinians. They are not Hamas supporters. They are Palestinians. Full stop. The war Israel is waging today is against Palestinians, and it always and has always been that's at stake here.